Greetings out there in YouTube land, and welcome to the House of Johnfeld. Once upon a time in New Orleans, a fashion designer named Ellen was visiting her then husband, who was producing the film French Quarter. He asked her if she would like to design costumes for the production. She had become bored being a ready-to-wear designer on Fifth Avenue, New York City, and jumped at the chance. The film was set in two periods, the present and the turn of the century. This was the beginning of a long career for Ellen Mirojnick, who has become the costume diva. The following year, she became a costume assistant to designer Christy Zia, assisting her on the films Fame and Endless Love. Fame was a smash hit at the box office and was later made into a TV series where Ellen designed the pilot. Reckless was her second film as a designer, and it told the story of a bad boy outcast football player and an upper-class cheerleader. Red and black were the two main colors Ellen used in the wardrobe. This was also Ellen's on-screen debut as a physics teacher. She puts in a memorable appearance in her brief scene. Ellen took on designing the cult classic Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, about a legally dead cop who is trained to be a unique assassin in service to the U.S. President. Fred Ward portrayed the title character, and Joel Grey played Cheon, the eccentric Korean martial arts master. For Nobody's Fool, she created an adorably feminine look for Rosanna Arquette's character Cassie, dressing her in an assortment of laces and trims, usually in various shades of pink. Cassie also wears a variety of hats that have a 20s and 30s influence. 1987 saw the release of Fatal Attraction, telling the tale of family man Dan Gallagher's tryst with the unhinged Alex Forrest, and the wrath she brings to his world. Alex was played by Glenn Close, and Ellen dressed her in sharp 80s fashion power suits, lacy lingerie, and the memorable black leather coat that became iconic. The white off-shoulder long-sleeve dress and knife accessory also became iconic. Fatal Attraction became a blockbuster, grossing $320 million worldwide. This was also the first film where Ellen dressed star Michael Douglas, and they would go on to make many more films together. Wall Street would cement their long collaboration, and Ellen created the Gordon Gekko look, with sharply tailored suits, bracers, button-down shirts, and white collars and cuffs, and colorful ties. So successful were Ellen's costumes that all the stockbrokers on Wall Street wanted to be Gordon Gekko, despite the fact that he was the villain and gets arrested in the end. His famous line, "Greed is good," became the motivation for succeeding in the cutthroat world of the stock exchange. Years later, I watched Wall Street and was amazed how well the clothes still looked and not very dated. There are 1980s styles in the film, but for the most part, it's timeless. Basic Instinct was a controversial thriller directed by Paul Verhoeven, and this was the first of several films he and Ellen would work on. The character Catherine Trammell, played by Sharon Stone, is a crime novelist and murder suspect. For the infamous interrogation scene, Ellen dressed Stone in an ivory white ensemble, and then later in the club scene, a gold-beaded cocktail dress. The film was a hit and made Sharon Stone a star. Chaplin is my favorite of all of Ellen's films, and it tells the life story of Charlie Chaplin, played by a perfectly cast Robert Downey Jr. Co-designed with John Mallow, the film takes place from 1894 to 1972 and studded with a beautiful, authentic wardrobe that takes the viewer back in time. The little tramp's outfit was reproduced to the last detail, from the bowler to the floppy shoes. My favorite outfit from the film is this blue-gray fur trim suit worn by Diane Lane as Paulette Goddard. Chaplin received mixed reviews when released, but the critics were unanimous in their praise for Robert Downey Jr.'s excellent performance. Come award season, Chaplin received 3 Oscar nominations for Best Actor, Production Design, and Music, but Ellen and Marlowe's work were overlooked. They did receive a BAFTA nomination, but lost to Catherine Martin and Angus Strothy's Spangled Creations from Strictly Ballroom. Ellen reteamed with Verhoeven to design The Notorious Showgirls, a tale of how Nomi Malone, played by Elizabeth Berkley, who gives a more than game performance than she's given credit for, comes to Las Vegas to be a dancer. Written by Joe Esterhaus, it is filled with glitz, glamour, nudity, and more sleaze that would make the Marquis de Sade scream uncle, thus earning its NC-17 rating. Just from looking, I can tell Ellen had a great time putting together the clothes using bright color, metallic fabrics, and more beads and sequins you can shake a stick at. There is an amusing scene where Nomi mispronounces Versace as Versace, and I wanted to include this illustration by Alejandro Mogadello, one of the many memorable scenes. When released, Showgirls was panned across the board and didn't make back its production budget. However, it practically became a cult film in one weekend. Eventually, it made $100 million with the home video and rental markets. When asked what her favorite movie from 1995 was, Sofia Coppola said it was Showgirls, and in 10 years it would become a classic. She was right. Mulholland Falls is one film I am fond of, and Ellen's work truly stands out. Set in the early 1950s, this neo-noir crime thriller is based on the Hat Squad, LA detectives known to stop at nothing when solving crimes. All the male characters are immaculately tailored and sharply dressed. This is one of the rare period films where the men are better dressed than the women. But that's not to say Ellen phoned it in on the women. The lady characters are also elegant in their 50s frocks, and Melanie Griffith and Jennifer Connelly never looked sexier. Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella was Ellen's next project, and it was her most extravagant assignment at that time. 1997, since it was fantasy, she didn't have to adhere to period detail and came up with an imaginative garments with sparkling details. Brandy played Cinderella, and her ball gown was light blue and embellished with silver. Whitney Houston played the fairy godmother, and her dress was inspired by the works of Gustav Klimt. Whoopi Goldberg played the queen, and she was swathed in royal blue trimmed with gold. Ellen received a well-deserved Emmy nomination but lost to Jane Rum for Tracy Takes on Sports. That same year saw the release of Starship Troopers, with Ellen displaying her range by creating futuristic sci-fi uniforms set in the 23rd century, with troopers fighting insectoid creatures called arachnids. This film won Ellen a Saturn Award for costume design. Her next sci-fi venture was The Chronicles of Riddick, a sequel to Pitch Black. At the time, most sci-fi costumes were very sleek and antiseptic. For Riddick, Ellen had detail and texture to the costumes. One can see the influence of medieval armor and fashion. Judi Dench played Ariane, a Bene Gesserit type character dressed in long flowing fabrics, making her look ethereal. I want to include Rat Race in this lineup, as it is a hilarious comedy in the vein of It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. One sequence of the film features an I Love Lucy convention, and it has many extras dressed up as Lucille Ball in 50s frocks, which Ellen no doubt had fun putting together. Ellen designed the pilot for the short-lived series GCB, which was based on the novel Good Christian Bitches by Kim Gatlin and was set in Dallas, Texas, among the wealthy and elitist sect of Dallas high society. Ellen pulled all the stops out and nailed it, coming up with clothes for the wealthy Dallas characters. In Dallas, the rich overdress, showing off their wealth, and GCB did this perfectly. My favorite outfit is the silver mini evening dress worn by Leslie Bibb as Amanda Vaughn. the former mean high school girl. It is embellished with sequins, beads, and tassels. Behind the candelabra was the story about the relationship between Liberace and Scott Thorson, played by Michael Douglas and Matt Damon respectively. Set in 1977 to 1987, Ellen recreated the glitzy costumes that Liberace wore in his Vegas show. She finally won an Emmy for her glamorous work. This was the first project she had with Steven Soderbergh, and they would go on to make several projects together, like the miniseries The Knick. Set in 1900 at the Knickerbocker Hospital, the story is about Dr. John Thackeray, played by Clive Owen, who is the new leader of the hospital and balancing his drug addiction with his duties. Ellen used a dark color scheme using shades of black, gray, blue, and brown that reflected the grim tone of the series. Ellen won a Guild Award for her work, as well as receiving a Career Achievement Trophy. The Greatest Showman was a musical version on the life of P.T. Barnum, played by Hugh Jackman, and how he created the greatest show on earth. Ellen and her team created all of the circus costumes seen in the film from scratch. The execs behind the film had no faith in it and released it without much fanfare. The film wound up being a surprise hit, and audiences fell in love with its grand whimsicality. My favorite outfit was the white gown embroidered with silver beads, worn by Rebecca Ferguson as Jenny Lind, the famous Swedish nightingale. And here is a Philip Boutet illustration of Ellen's design. Maleficent, Mistress of Evil was Ellen's return to fantasy. She decided to spruce up the color when she found many of the peasant clothes in the Disney wardrobe stock to be too dull. For Aurora's dresses, they appear to be influenced by nature in winter. Maleficent's costumes are black leather and silk, and for Queen Ingrid, pearls and brocades were used. Ellen won her 4th Guild Award for her efforts on Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. Netflix came calling for Ellen's services for their new series Bridgerton, based on the books by Julia Quinn and created by Chris Van Dusen and produced by Shonda Rhimes. Set in the Regency era of London, high society families set out to get their daughters married to wealthy suitors. Co-designed with her longtime assistant, John Glazer, they came up with suits and dresses that exaggerated the empire waist gowns of that era, using big, colorful prints and details, as if Scassi was designing the Directoire era. Both Ellen and Glazer received Emmy nominations for their work, but lost to Gabrielle Bender for The Queen's Gambit. Ellen returned to the land of Cinderella in a reimagined version, taking on a more feminist stance. With a perfectly cast Billy Porter as the fabulous godmother, Ellen dressed him in a golden vermilion outfit studded with jewels that bring memories of Rosalind Russell and Auntie Mame. The other items were clearly influenced by Dior and Schiaparelli. Christopher Nolan commissioned Ellen to design his next grand epic, Oppenheimer, that followed the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, a theoretical physicist who helped develop the first nuclear weapon during World War II. The film covers 1926 to 1963. One stipulation that Nolan had was Oppenheimer was the only character allowed to wear a hat, which was odd because everyone wore a hat during that era. Nolan was correct in this request, and that particular hat became essential to the character. The hat was unusual as it was a combo of a pork pie hat and the brim of a Stetson. Getting this hat put together was a challenge, and she found a hat shop in Hollywood that was able to make it. It was a wonderful collaboration between Ellen and Nolan, as they were on the same level. Ellen did extensive research on menswear fashions through the years, and her love of designing for men showed in each frame. The film opened to critical acclaim and big box office success, and when it came to award season, the film cleaned up. The best part was Ellen finally received her long overdue Oscar nomination, And accompanying Ellen to the ceremony was her lovely daughter, Lily Mirojnick, who has gone on into show business as an actress and has been very prolific in film and television. Unfortunately, Ellen lost to Holly Waddington for Poor Things. She should have won, in my opinion. The amazing thing about Ellen Mirojnick is she has designed for every genre in the entertainment industry: drama, comedy, action, and horror. And that is just those four. Ellen's range is wider than the Grand Canyon, and she is always ready for a challenge. That is how her career has endured for so long. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and that's the way the cow ate the cabbage.